A father crossed all boundaries with his daughter. When the mother, a doctor, discovered that her daughter was unwell, she ordered an ultrasound. The result of the scan shocked her to her core because what was revealed in her daughter's stomach would leave anyone stunned. Watch this story in full, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I am Dr. Damon. I used to go on night shifts, leaving my husband and daughter at home. However, my maid would repeatedly urge me not to work night shifts, saying, "I endure the punishment meant for you." I dismissed her words as trivial. But one night at 2 a.m., I suddenly came home early, only to see something on the living room floor that left me paralyzed with shock. My name is Dr. Damon, and my life was a balance. That's why I continued tolerating my husband. I often talked to Meru, taking updates about the household. I would notice her face regularly. She seemed happy with my daughter, caring for her well, and managing the housework with ease. After all, my house had all the modern facilities, making chores much simpler. But lately, something seemed off about Meru. Her face carried an unusual sadness, and she looked increasingly worried. One day, I noticed her limping slightly. Concerned, I asked, "What happened to you?" She quickly brushed it off, saying, "Oh, it's nothing." Then she reminded me of what she had told me earlier, that her mother was arranging her marriage, and the groom's family was demanding a hefty dowry. She explained how her father was bedridden and unable to help. I reassured her, "Don't worry, I'll help as much as I can." I even planned to buy some essential items for her dowry and, if needed, ask my wealthy friends to contribute. I was confident that if each of them provided a small item, Meru's needs could easily be met. Despite my assurances, she remained deeply troubled. Her distraction began to show in her work. Over the past 2 or 3 days, she had broken several dishes, claiming they had slipped from her hands. It was understandable. Her mind was clearly elsewhere. I tried to comfort her, telling her everything would be fine. However, her face betrayed more than just worry. There was a peculiar fear in her eyes. Meanwhile, my night shifts were ongoing, and my husband had stopped coming to our bedroom at night, choosing instead to sleep in another room. This shift in his behavior started to affect me. The bond between a husband and wife is such that, no matter how far apart they drift, there's always a pull to come back together. I used to think my husband couldn't live without me, yet he had gone an entire month without speaking to me. In the past, even after arguments, we'd find reasons to talk. Now it felt as if he didn't even acknowledge my presence in the house. His indifference began to infuriate me, leaving me with a growing sense of resentment. However, since we barely crossed paths, him being out during the day and me gone at night, there was no time to address or resolve anything. Even a simple apology seemed impossible. One day, Meru said something utterly strange to me. I had returned home early and was preparing to sleep. As part of my nightly routine, I drank a glass of milk, which Meru brought to me. Hesitantly, she said, "Ma'am, I need to talk to you about something." Exhausted, I replied, "I've been up all night. Let's talk later in the evening when I wake up." But she insisted, "It's important." I sighed. "All right, tell me." Her words were cryptic and left me both surprised and confused. She didn't explain her point fully and, with her head bowed, quietly left the room. She said, "I endure the punishment meant for you." Her words left me stunned. I asked, "What do you mean?" She replied, "Ma'am, we poor people are born into misery, and we carry it with us until our last breath. You are educated and wise. I'm sure you'll understand what I mean." I'm not allowed to say more. Walls have ears. Her cryptic statement puzzled me, but I was too exhausted to think deeply about it at the time and fell asleep. It's easy to judge someone else's life and wonder why they don't take certain actions. But when you live your own life, you realize that time and circumstances often dictate your choices. You let things continue as they are because you lack the time or energy to make changes. That's exactly what was happening with me. Meru was taking care of my home and my daughter, and I didn't need more than that. Even if my husband was angry and distant, I found relief in the fact that I didn't have to spend time managing our strained relationship, allowing me to focus on other things. One day, I asked my colleague to cover my shift so I could go home. I told her, I miss my husband. After all, he was my husband, and we were bound by marriage. any emotional or physical desires we had needed to be fulfilled with each other. When I arrived home, my husband was in his room, but he took his time opening the door. I asked, "What were you doing?" He replied, "I was sleeping. People sleep at night." I teased him, "Now you sleep at night? You didn't used to." A faint smile appeared on my face. He snapped back, "Stop with your nonsense, I'm very tired." I said, "I've handed off my work to someone else to spend time with you, and here you are heading to bed." He smirked. "So you missed me?" I admitted, "Of course I missed you. Who else would I miss?" I suggested we move on from our past arguments and asked for forgiveness. "You were angry and said a lot of things to me too. It's the husband's job to make up with his wife, and here I am, trying to mend things with you. You didn't even try. It's like you completely erased me from your mind," I said. For the first time in a while, my husband softened and said, "How could I forget you? Come here." I sat beside him and he remarked, "Husbands and wives are like pots and pans. When they're close, they clash, but they can't live without each other." I smiled and replied, "That's true. We've had some great times together." The next morning, as I was having breakfast, I noticed Meru watching me with an odd expression. When I asked what was wrong, she hesitated and said, "Nothing. I was mistaken about something, but I've sorted it out now." There was a sadness in her eyes. I pressed her further, but she insisted there was nothing to share. For 3 or 4 days, my relationship with my husband seemed to improve. We laughed and talked, but then, like always, things fell apart again. We argued and he told me, "I don't need you. I can manage perfectly fine without you." I asked, "What do you mean by that?" He brushed it off, saying, "It's nothing." I said it out of anger. I replied, "Sometimes people say things in anger that reveal their true feelings." He went silent, which was unusual for him. Normally, he would argue back. It felt like he was hiding something, but I didn't have the time to figure it out. I went back to work. Meru repeated her cryptic statement, "I'm bearing the burdens meant for you." This time, I took her words more seriously and began to wonder why she kept saying such things. Could something be happening in my home during my absence? I decided I needed to find out. One night, with only 3 hours left until dawn and no pressing cases at work, I headed home early. On the way, I kept thinking about how a maid's job should simply be to manage household chores. But Meru's strange behavior and vague comments hinted at something far beyond that. Meru often said strange things, but never fully explained herself. I decided that tonight I would see for myself what went on in my house while I was away. I assumed everyone would be in their rooms, sleeping. Meru usually slept in my daughter's room to keep her from feeling scared. With this assumption, I headed straight toward my daughter's room upon returning home. But as I entered the house, what I saw froze me in my tracks. My feet felt glued to the ground. I didn't need to go any further because everything was unfolding right in front of my eyes. In the middle of my living room floor, there they were. When they saw me, they froze as if the ground had slipped from beneath their feet. My husband immediately got up and ran, while Meru covered her face and moved aside. Furious, I grabbed her by the collar and shouted, "How dare you?" She pleaded, "Please forgive me, ma'am. I was helpless. Your husband gave me a lot of money. I needed it desperately for my wedding because I didn't want to be humiliated in my in-laws' home." I told her to leave immediately and never show her face to me again. "If I ever see you in my house again, I'll kill you," I shouted. She begged for forgiveness, but I threw her out, not caring how she would get home at that hour. I stormed into my room, where my husband sat as if nothing had happened. I confronted him. "Is this how you repay my loyalty?" He replied coldly, "You challenged me. You know I'm a man, and I find happiness in certain things. What were you thinking when you took a 3-month night shift? How could I stay away from you for 3 months?" I shot back, "I wish you were saying this out of love, but the truth is, it's just selfishness. That's why you did this, to fulfill your needs." He didn't even try to deny it. "At least I'm honest about what I want," he said. "Instead of sugarcoating things, I tell you straight, I needed you, and when you weren't there, I found someone else to fulfill my needs. I took advantage of her situation, yes, but that's who I am." I stared at him in disbelief. "You could have said this differently. You could have shown a shred of decency, but instead you justify your actions by blaming me. I will never forgive you." He shrugged. "Don't forgive me. Do whatever you want." I spent the whole day thinking about what to do with this relationship. I had already sacrificed so much to keep it alive. I didn't want my daughter to grow up asking why her father wasn't around or if he had left me. But now the damage was irreversible. My husband had betrayed me multiple times and right under my nose with the maid I had trusted. I took my daughter and moved to another city. I transferred my job to a new hospital and cut all ties with my husband. I changed my phone number and didn't tell anyone where I had gone. To this day, he doesn't know where we are. Relatives have told me that he seems very upset and regretful these days. Now I need advice. Should I file for divorce or stay away from him for some time and see if he comes to his senses and asks for forgiveness? I don't even know if he's looking for me or what's going on in his mind. If you were in my place, what would you do? I don't want to destroy my home, but can I stay with someone who has betrayed me so deeply? When a man cheats, women are often pressured to forgive. But forgiveness isn't easy. Was it my fault for challenging him or for hiring a young, vulnerable maid and entrusting her with my home? Now I feel completely lost and confused. I need your advice. Maybe your perspectives can help me figure out what to do. I have a young daughter who's growing up. My husband may not be a good husband, but he is a good father. Should I forgive him just for that? Please share your advice.